Hello, BBN. Pope updated on Jaden Quaintance and MO Diabate. Is Quaintance close to playing for the Cats? Let's see the news. But first, subscribe to the channel and keep receiving more updates. Kentucky basketball is at a crossroads, but also a time of hope. Recent losses against elite teams have highlighted the weaknesses of a roster still under construction, but the update on injured players brings a light at the end of the tunnel. For a team that has historically been synonymous with excellence and resilience, this news comes as a breath of fresh air amidst a challenging scenario. The absence of key players like MO Diabate and Jaden Quaintance has been significantly felt so far. There's no denying that the impact of these losses has affected both the tactical dynamics and the confidence of the group. However, Mark Pope, with his balanced and methodical approach, seems to be building a bridge between the uncertain present and the promising future for the Wildcats. His stance on updates about injured players reflects not only concern for the athlete's physical health, but also for the team's emotional cohesion. Quaintance, in particular, is generating great expectations among fans. The positive progression reported by Pope is a reminder that, even in difficult times, college basketball is a constantly evolving ecosystem. The coach was clear in stating that a return to the court is not yet imminent, but the mention that he is progressing a lot sounds like music to the ears of those who follow the program. A player like Quaintance, with his imposing physique and versatile skill, could be exactly the difference needed to rebalance the forces on the court. He will not just be another name on the roster, but a piece capable of changing the narrative of the season if he can quickly integrate into the rhythm demanded by the competitive schedule. In Diabate's case, the expression day-to-day still carries a certain degree of ambiguity, but the consistent improvement mentioned by Pope is an encouraging sign. Ankle injuries are treacherous and can seriously compromise the performance of athletes who depend on agility and explosiveness. However, the way Diabate has responded to treatment suggests that his reintegration may be closer than initially predicted. When that happens, he will have the opportunity to reaffirm his role as a central piece in the paint, something the team clearly missed in recent games. But perhaps the most encouraging news is the gradual return of Jalen Low. His previous absence was felt mainly in playmaking and the ability to generate opportunities for his teammates. As Pope highlighted, Low is a player who doesn't need many possessions to make an impact, and that's a rare and valuable quality. His court vision and passing accuracy have the potential to transform Kentucky's offensive flow, offering creative solutions in tight situations. Even though he's still physically readjusting and adjusting his timing, his presence is already an injection of energy into the team. The upcoming games against Indiana and St. John's represent crucial tests for the program. These opponents will not only measure the team's current strength, but also serve as a barometer to assess how resilient this team can be. If Low continues to gain minutes and confidence, and if the returns of Quaintance and Diabate materialize soon, there's reason to believe the worst is over. Mark Pope has proven to be a leader capable of navigating turbulent waters without losing sight of the horizon. He knows that rebuilding the identity of a team as traditional as Kentucky is no easy task, but every small advance, whether in player recovery or the team's tactical evolution, contributes to this process. The season may be far from perfect, but the combination of emerging talent, experienced leadership, and renewed optimism suggests that better days are ahead. For Wildcats fans, now it's time to wait for a turnaround. Denzel Aberdeen's interview came at a crucial moment for Kentucky basketball, and interestingly, it functions almost as an honest diagnosis, but also as a reaffirmation that this team hasn't given up on anything yet. Although criticism has increased, especially after losses to ranked teams, Aberdeen's speech sheds light on something deeper than a simple technical stumble: the difficulty of translating what is seen in practice into real execution when the ball goes up. And this, in the context of the program led by Mark Pope, gains weight. Pope has taken on the challenge of rebuilding the Wildcats' identity, bringing intensity and a style of play that values movement, discipline, and competitiveness. In this scenario, Aberdeen's words don't sound like justification. They sound like recognition and commitment. In the 4 losses against top 25 teams, Kentucky wasn't just outplayed, it was controlled. The pattern repeated itself. The opponent sets a pace early, and the Wildcats find no answers. This initial gap, difficult to correct during the game, becomes even more evident when there's a lack of energy and defensive consistency. It was precisely this deficiency that fans and analysts began to observe more closely. Aberdeen, however, insists on emphasizing that the internal environment is far from the chaos that the external narrative might suggest. He repeats, almost like a mantra, that effort and intensity exist daily in training in Lexington. The problem, according to him, lies in translating that into games. The veteran SEC point guard maintains that the team enters the court to train with the same energy regardless of the previous result, and that there is a collective awareness of the urgency to raise the level. It is at this point that his speech takes a turning point. We are going to shift our energy and our effort to the games. We are definitely going to make a leap from here on out. What is noticeable is that Aberdeen does not identify a structural crisis. He speaks of execution, of precision, of micro details that make a difference at the highest level of college basketball. The defense is conceding too many points. The offense, in turn, lacks fluidity. The ball movement, always a barometer of a team's collective spirit, has been failing. But all of this, in his view, is correctable. There is no fragmentation, no loss of locker room spirit, no indifference. There are adjustments. And this is where Mark Pope enters the conversation again, although not directly mentioned in the interview. His approach has always demanded game reading, adaptability, and collective intelligence to react to a variety of opposing defenses that emerge throughout the season. Aberdeen knows this, and makes it clear that, against different formations, there is no single formula. It is necessary to find what works at that moment against that opponent. This demonstrates maturity and responsibility. Aberdeen's final message, without grand speeches, makes one thing clear. Kentucky is still trying to figure out who it is this season, but it is doing so consciously. There are no internal alarm bells ringing. There is work. And above all, there is the understanding that the first step to correcting all the others is simple and non-negotiable: effort. Let's see how this works. The crushing defeat to Gonzaga, a 94-59 loss that resonated more strongly than any scoreline could suggest, opened the door to a flood of opinions, criticisms, and concerns. Among them, one voice stands out not for its noise, but for the weight of its history: Dan Issel. When one of the greatest Wildcats of all time decides to speak, the fan stops, takes a deep breath, and listens. Issel, with his directness, compared the team situation to an old episode of the Andy Griffith Show. It was a metaphor of the sheriff who finally understands that the kid needs discipline, a reality check that old-fashioned wouldn't shed. The message was clear. The moment demands firmness, adjustments, responsibility. But behind the metaphor, there was something bigger, an attempt to recover the sense of identity of a team that, in this early part of the season, has fluctuated in basic fundamentals, from defensive intensity to collective commitment. The record of 5 wins and 4 losses before facing North Carolina Central is a number that doesn't reflect the talent of the roster or the high standards built up over decades in Lexington. The 4 losses came against the 4 strongest opponents faced so far: Louisville, Michigan State, North Carolina, and Gonzaga, and 2 of them, against the Spartans and Zags, exposed flaws that can't be easily explained. But amidst Issel's criticisms, which mentioned problems with effort, communication, and rebounding, there was also a firm defense of Coach Mark Pope, now the face of the project and responsible for rebuilding the internal culture since his first day in charge. Pope, who led Kentucky to an Elite Eight with a roster decimated by injuries and tied a historic record with 8 wins against top 15 AP opponents, knows that this moment doesn't represent what he expects from his team, and especially, it doesn't represent what the fans expect. But Issel was emphatic in reminding everyone that the coach hasn't forgotten how to do his job. He emphasized that the real answer needs to come from players who have yet to demonstrate the necessary chemistry to transform individual talent into consistent results. By calling the hasty comparisons made by some fans to Billy Gillispie or Kenny Payne ridiculous, Issel clarified the matter and brought perspective back to the debate. Firing Pope after one season would be absurd. The coach is building a project from scratch, and the very strength of Nil's resources, which so excited fans during the roster-building period, is now proving to be a challenge of integration, ego management, and discipline. It's a complex process, and complex processes don't produce immediate answers. What Issel brought, above all, was a call to responsibility. He did criticize the roster building, but not Pope's coaching. He emphasized that at this moment, there are players with questionable shooting selection, little defensive effort, and a lack of willingness to fight for important possessions, elements that are independent of tactical schemes and depend on attitude. Attitude is what defines teams that grow throughout the season, especially when guided by a coach who has already proven adaptability and leadership. The drop in the rankings, falling out of the top 25 for the first time under Pope's command, was unsettling. But it also opens up a crucial point: the opportunity to start over, to redefine priorities, and, for the first time this season, to play like the team that promised to challenge the best in the country. Pope is not shirking responsibility. On the contrary, he has repeatedly stated after games that he takes responsibility, that he will make adjustments, that he knows where he needs to intervene. And when a coach with his track record says this, it doesn't sound like a rehearsed speech. It sounds like an honest assessment from someone who understands the magnitude of the position he holds. The moment calls for adjustments, undoubtedly, but it also calls for calm and vision. In an environment as emotional as that of Kentucky basketball, Dan Issel's word acts as a guiding principle. Firm, critical, but also fair. He recognizes that Pope deserves time, that Pope is the right person, and that, beyond the stumbles, there's a coach committed to restoring the competitiveness that the fans demand and that the history of the blue shirt itself imposes. Now, the challenge lies in the locker room, in training, in the daily effort to transform a talented squad into a cohesive team. Mark Pope has already proven that he knows how to build resilient teams, that he knows how to compete with the big teams, that he knows how to build something sustainable even amidst adversity. Leave your opinion.